Welcome to Grief and the Spirit Experience podcast, where we discuss spiritual practices for healing, happiness, and a life of purpose after your child transitions back to spirit. I'm Schall, and I invite you to join us each Monday for enlightening conversations about spirituality, communicating with spirit, and our own eternal existence. Hello, Kiki. Welcome to the Spirit Experience podcast.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
This should be a very interesting conversation today. I am very interested in learning about your modalities because you have a little twist on one of them that I hadn't heard before hearing about you. Would you, first of all, describe your modalities and so that our listeners understand what kind of modalities you work with?
Sure. So I work with Celtic Reiki, where we draw energy from the trees and different tree essences into healing sessions. I work in the Akashic Records. I also work with sound healing, and I've created my own type of session called Roots and Records, where I'm combining Celtic Reiki and the Akashic Records.
And what is the difference between Celtic Reiki and the Reiki that most people know about?
Usui, that a few things. So Usui Reiki is the traditional, it's the mainstream, it's what a lot of folks know. It was the first one I was attuned to. And that originates in Japan. The symbols that you work with are called kanji, so they are Japanese symbols. Celtic Reiki was created in the UK by a man named Martin Pentecost in 1998. And it actually uses an ancient Druidic alphabet called Ogham. It's spelled Ogham. And each Ogham symbol is attached to a specific tree. So when we work with it for our self-healing or with clients, we're drawing these symbols, we're connecting with that power and that knowledge and that energy of that tree to assist with the healing sessions.
And then you also do Akashic Record Healing.
Yes.
Would you explain that a little bit for our listeners?
So the Akashic Records is, a lot of people see it or view it as this giant library. And it's records of all of your souls, all of your incarnations, your feelings, your thoughts, your emotions, your ideas, basically your oversoul. So all of the information from all the lifetimes you've ever lived, and you have access to them. And you can also go to guides and practitioners to go into the records for you. And your higher self usually gives permission for others to gain access on your behalf to get answers to questions, to resolve life things, or just to give you that clarity or that sense of purpose. Like, why am I here? Is the number one question I get asked often.
Why am I here? I know. And that has to
Yeah.
do with purpose as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And then another modality you use is sound healing.
Yes. Love sound healing. So working with in different vibrations and frequencies to heal the body, unlock trapped emotion, release trauma without necessarily having to relive it, without having to understand or think about why. So it's a very scientific as well as intuitive way of healing. So there are different frequencies that are connected to different parts of the body. I work with different instruments. My crystal singing bowls are in the back. I have a gong. I work with chimes. I have a drum. So just whatever I'm called to intuitively for this session or for group healing, whatever is needed in that moment. And 9 times out of 10, people fall asleep. I usually have someone or multiple people snoring, which I'm like, okay, great. They're really relaxed. I did my job.
Describe that a little bit further, because if they fall asleep, what's happening?
Sure. So at the beginning of a session, I ask them to set intentions and they don't even have to share it with me. So subconsciously, they're coming for a specific reason. And perhaps it is just to relax and turn off our monkey brain, right? Going in different places. A lot of times we're in that fight or flight, that constant state of stress. So we haven't had a chance to relax and process. It also just gives them a chance to get into a deeper brainwave state. A lot of times we don't have a deep sleep after our REM at night. Like many of us get up, we toss and turn. We're very restless. We get a lot of screen time. We spend a lot of time in front of our phones and TVs. So it's hard for us to fall into that deep restful sleep that our bodies crave and need to keep our immune systems high, to keep us sharp so we don't have that brain in the afternoon. But it's similar to Reiki. The sound knows where to go and it knows what to do. Everyone will have a different experience. I could play one instrument and each person in the room is going to experience it differently. To some, it could be very intense. To others, it might not be loud enough. It could release a headache for one person. It could create a headache in another. People are often really thirsty afterward. I've had people say they have tension in their shoulder or their low back and they could feel it release and fade away. So it's almost like this internal massage based on the vibrations in different parts of the body.
I need some massage.
We all do. We just don't, it's self-care, right? The focus on
Right.
self-care is so important.
Absolutely. Why don't you tell us a personal story about your own healing or transformation through some of these modalities?
Sure. I take it back to the beginning. It was 2020, the world shut down. We're working from home. And with all of that going on, my best friend of 8 years was diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer out of the blue. We're both fitness instructors. We had just been traveling. We had come back from a 3-day fitness event before the shutdown, fully healthy, like dancing for 8 hours, 3 days in a row. So this kind of was a shock to all of us. Thankfully, was able to spend a lot of time with her throughout that year before she transitioned. And grief in and of itself is difficult to navigate. And we all go through it in our own way. During a pandemic, when you can't hold a funeral and you can't say goodbye and go through the normal rites of passage and to say your piece and have that closure, I didn't realize the denial I was in, the grief I was holding. I was depressed. I wasn't sleeping. I was pretty angry. So I guess I was going through some of the stages of grief. And things opened up a little bit, enough to where a girlfriend invited me to a retreat. It was outdoors. We were all spread out. And there was a Reiki practitioner there, as well as a sound healer. And we had just finished sunrise yoga. We're laying on our mats for Savasana, and the Reiki practitioner's going around offering Reiki. So I raised my hand. I had never heard of it before. I didn't know anything about it. And I was like, why not? When in Rome. And I started to relax. A lot of the tension that I was holding was like this physical leaving my body. And then the floodgates opened and the tears started to fall. And I was like, finally having that nourishing, really needed, like, all out sob. And it was wonderful. It might sound weird, but this had been 9 months since she had passed, and to the point where the Reiki practitioner was feeling some of my emotion and tears were coming down her cheek. So afterwards, every second I had, it's like, what was that? What just happened? I want to work through other things. What else can it do? And that was the midlife awakening that set me on this energetic healing, holistic. Let's take care of the whole person, not just physical. I was in the fitness industry for 18 years, loved it, but I really hadn't focused that much. I hadn't gone really deep on mental, let alone emotional. And we definitely didn't talk about spiritual at that point. So the sound healer was giving like chakra alignments with her tuning forks. Again, didn't know what that was. And I was like, let's have a go. So she scanned me, which I was like, I don't know what she's doing, but she was putting her hands over my body. I was laying on a couch and she intuitively picked like 3 forks and started waving them over my head, over my hips, and over my knees. Now it was a 5-hour drive to get to the retreat. So I had a lot of tension in my low back and it was a little sore. I had not shared that with her. We also did a long hike earlier that day and I was dehydrated. So I was starting to get that dehydration headache in my forehead. But she twanged the tuning fork and was waving it. I could just feel like the tension released. It was almost like this pop and it was gone. And the same when she was waving it around my hips, I could feel like my backs loosen up and like my calves release. All the way up my spine and down my legs, there was this relaxation. And then my knees were sore from the hike and all of that went away. It's fascinating. It was 15 minutes, right? I've been to 1.5-hour massages and not had half of that released and have been bruised the next day. So I was fascinated. And again, any free moment, I was hanging out. How did you learn this? How does one get into this? I love it. And that set me on the path to get into sound healing for myself. Again, all of this was to learn and to help myself get better and healthier and work through some inner child wounds, trauma that had come up, and different emotions that I realized I hadn't dealt.
That's really powerful. I had no idea that sound healing could do that in such a short period of time. Because I too, I've been to chiropractors, I've been to massage therapists, and not a lot really gets released a lot of times. But I also like that you had been in the industry of physical healing for so long, but now you see that if we're going to heal, it's really a holistic approach because we are spirit, we are mind, we are body. And I do love that you came to that realization in that experience. I would love for you to share some of the results of that people have had when they've worked with you.
Well, where to start? Come to me for a variety of reasons. Some is physical, right? The 3D, the body, the aches and the pain. I think that's where we all start. That's very tangible. We know we have a pain or an ache, and we know when it gets better and then when it goes away. And not everything is as instant as the tuning forks. Those issues were not with me for very long, but I have had clients who have had a frozen shoulder, for example. Like one session or one sound bath isn't going to make that disappear per se, but it will lessen and loosen. And the more that they do their own work, and again, physical, mental, and emotional, as well as the spiritual, it will loosen and become better. So if it takes you 5 years with an injury, say you sprain your ankle and it's been bothering you and you never got it looked at, and then you come for sound healing or even Reiki, probably isn't going to go away in one session because you've been dealing with it for 5 years. So you want to look at the reality, but it's another modality, right? It's another tool. It does not take the place. I always like to say this disclaimer of doctor's advice. It's not meant for you to stop taking your medication. It's to enhance and amplify what you're already doing. If you're not getting the results that you like or want, or if you're looking to maybe get off meds and looking at holistic therapies to help you get better faster so you can do that. I've had people come to me where they really just wanted to get off pain meds. They're like, I don't want to pop pills anymore. The other thing, they're like, I'm doing everything I can. I just can't seem to sleep, working out like crazy. I'm staying hydrated. I'm eating well, but I can't lose this weight. And I know it's because I'm not sleeping. So my body's holding on to this stress and this cortisol. So we work through that. And a lot of times we'll combine sessions too. So it might be half Celtic Reiki, half sound, or half Celtic Reiki, half Akashic Records if they have questions. And some also feel like I have done absolutely everything I can, mind, body, spirit. I have my spiritual practice. I journal. I have my meditation. I move my body every day and take care of my nutrition. Something's holding me back. I think it might be from a past life. So then we can visit the record and see if there's anything that can be healed and released in a past life from a lesson they learned, where we can release that karma, we can release that lesson if they've learned it, and it's not serving the higher good in this incarnation.
And you're so right about these things being tools. I think when you start talking about spirituality and you start talking about some of these modalities, people get a little weirded out sometimes, or they don't understand it. I didn't understand it. I had a tarot reading the summer that my son transitioned, and I didn't know anything about tarot. But it was so powerful in that session, the message that I received, that I understood that these things can be tools. They're tools to get into that energy. They're tools to get into that space. And I do love that you have the opportunity to help people become whole so that they don't need to rely on medications. Because yes, sometimes you need them. We're going to keep that disclaimer going.
Yes.
But sometimes you really don't. Sometimes you can get past that. And I think that any time that you can get past that is a good thing. Let's talk about connecting with spirit. From your perspective, What does that mean in terms of healing, in terms of transformation, in terms of purpose, in terms of happiness? What does it mean to you to really connect with spirit, and how do you help your clients do that?
Really good question. So, for the longest time, I would say I was disconnected from my intuition, from spirit, and from my gifts. And a lot of that comes down to trust. Some of that is uh, our caregivers. It could be parents, it could be teachers, it could be society, what we're taught to believe. We were just talking about tools, right? And some people think crystals or tarot or cards in general are evil, right? There's that stigma around it. It's only there if you believe it's there, right? And I look at everything I do as a tool to help me be the best version of me. So I tune with my higher self. I talk to source, to spirit. Some people think God, Allah. I don't split hairs, right? Spirituality to me is such a unique personal journey. So it's very separate and different than religion, and not knocking one. They're just different in my point of view. And my spiritual path might be different than yours, but we could use the same tools to connect us to spirit. You mentioned getting in that right space, getting in that high vibration. You don't need a practitioner, right? You don't need to go take a course or get attuned. You are the self healer, right? I facilitate, I can guide, I hold space. I'm not the one doing the healing. My clients are controlling the healing session. They're navigating with your intention and will and how they connect to spirit, their guides, their guardians. That's where the transformation happens. So I consider myself someone who helps people remember their gifts. I might help activate something that was dormant, initiate, but I'm not doing the healing myself.
Yes, and that makes so much sense. I think too that sometimes people think spirituality is this big mystical thing when it's really not. It's really not. You already are a spirit. You already have that within you.
Yes.
And I love that you acknowledge that you're just there to guide people to connect with it on their own, to use their own intuition, their own higher self to realize who they really are. And what I want to help guide people to is that spirituality is just acknowledging a part of you that already exists.
Yes. Yes. We are, like you mentioned, spirit. We are divine, infinite spirit, source, God. There's a part of God in all of us, right? That's the terminology you're comfortable with. So when we shut that down, we're shutting down our gods and we're disconnecting ourselves from spirit, from our intuition, from the answers that we seek and the nudges, the synchronicities, the angel numbers. It only means what you want it to mean. And we could all see 111 and it could mean a completely different thing to all three of us, right? So tapping in and trusting that the message you're receiving is meant for you. And I remember my first Reiki attunement and go through a 21-day cleanse and just working with the symbols and working and clearing out and going through the principles. And it was so transformational. And I could have stopped there. My intention was, no, I'm going to stop here. I'm going to work on myself. I'm a project. And that was early on in my awakening journey, and just surrounding myself with more like-minded, open-minded people. I want to say, like, some things that I believe in resonate with people that I'm friends with, and not everything does. They're like, oh, yes, but that one doesn't feel right. And that's okay. There's something in their space that is saying that we don't believe that. And that doesn't mean we can't be friends. We can have different beliefs. Right? You can connect to source differently. I have girlfriends that only do Akashic Record and no longer do Reiki, and they evolve and they drop modalities. I like to have a hefty toolbox. Sometimes you need a hammer. Sometimes you need a crowbar. Sometimes you need a screwdriver. Sometimes you need a chainsaw. So just it depends on your project. We were talking about
that.
Reiki.
I love that, Kiki.
Oh, thank you.
Because we do. I mean, we have different projects at different times in regards to ourselves and what is going on with us, what we want to have go on with us, what we want to see happen for us. So that's a beautiful way to put it. Would you also talk about, because I think this is, for me, this is really important, is releasing attachments that no longer serve, whether it's a physical emotional, spiritual, mental, but learning how to release your attachment to things that really don't serve your own best interest, your own highest good.
Yes. And I still work through this. I feel new level, new devil. Like you're like, oh, I got really good at detaching in this one area of my life. Cool. The universe says, now let's do it over here. So I'll use work, for example. I worked in staffing and recruiting for many years, 9 to 5, which ended up being like an 8:30 to 6 and weekend work. You get it. So I would get that ping and it was my first, I didn't have to answer, but I would read it after hours. And then I was like, oh, should I respond? I'm after hours. And it would stew. And I would make it mean something. I would attach emotion to the point where I wasn't sleeping. Now, my boss had no clue this was happening. They probably were just like afterthought, sent the email so they didn't forget before they walked out of the office. I know that now, but then I was like, hey, they just want me to work. You get in those mindsets. You're like, I've got to get groceries. I'm missing my class at the gym, whatever it is. We've all been there. And then that's the day you get stuck in traffic and there's no parking spot. So like everything escalates. But I had created that whole story in my head from one ping of a 2-sentence email. I don't know if you relate, but that's one example. Anger, frustration, and I had to sit with that. And going to one of the Reiki principles, I release angry thoughts and feelings. And it was such a true principle for me. Like I would just sit there and I was like, I release angry thoughts and feelings, take a deep breath and let it out. And sometimes I would have to do it 10, 12, 15 times to take my power back because this was me doing this to me. My boss had no idea it was happening. And then it started to get easier. So now when things come up like that, maybe I say it 1 to 3 times because my body is so used to it now. And I do the principles every morning and I start out if there any lingering anger is a lower vibration emotion. It's a denser frequency. So the more angry I was, the harder it was for me to hear source and connect to my intuition. So I definitely wanted to shed that. One of the things I've started doing more recently is having is a fire ceremony. So I'll write something down on a piece of paper that I want to release or detach from. I will thank it for the lesson it's taught me, the trigger, whatever the message was in the mess. And then I'll light it usually safely over a sink or a bowl of water and say goodbye. And that, I just feel like it releases it. Some people bury things. Some people like to put things in water. Some just do it in their mind, in their third eye, and just picture a release or even cord cutting. I've been doing a lot of cord cutting intentions over the past month, particularly in the records. And that has been really transformative for my clients. They're like, I'm sleeping better. I just feel like this weight was lifted. I don't know what it was from or where it was from, but I just feel lighter and more free. So maybe you're listening to this and, oh, fire, I'm a fire element person. So maybe that really resonates with you, or you're a water person. So you might want to have a water ceremony. So try them all out because I did. One might be stronger for you than another, and allow yourself to play and have fun because you really can't get it wrong, right? We're all different.
I do like that, doing something physical to release something emotional. And not everybody has to do that. Like you were saying, some people can do that in their mind, and some people, if they do it physically for a while, then they get used to that feeling of how to release that attachment. And then they no longer might necessarily need any of the physical applications to do that. But I do think it's so important to really recognize things that you're holding on to that aren't serving you.
Yes. Going back to the physical, I went through and did a house cleaning. I don't know if you're familiar with I think it's Tess Whitehurst. She wrote a book she's wrote many books, but The Good Energy book. And I think it's in one of the first few chapters. She talks about energy tabs, like the tabs that you have open on your computer. And you don't realize how much energy each one of these tabs could be siphoning from you. It could be a little pile of clothes, or it could be a cluster of magazines, or it could be the book box you have it taken to Goodwill in 6 months. Like each one of those has been a tether and is taking a little bit of your mental energy, a little bit of your emotional energy. So I went through, I filled garbage bags. I did a Goodwill thing. I cleaned, I reorganized, I completely revamped my office. I got the best sleep. I was like, I had no idea that stuff was weighing me down. And I had no excuse or reason why I hadn't done it. Oh, I can do that tomorrow. I can do it tomorrow. But the only person, again, I was doing it to myself. And I was like, no, I'm worth more than that. I can spend 5 minutes here and 10 minutes here. Like, it didn't take as much time as I had painted it out to take in my head. And it was totally worth doing. And it helped.
Absolutely. And you are worth it. You are worth it. A lot of times we clean the house because company's coming. You're worth it. You're worth it to live in that clean house. And
100%.
I have been becoming more and more minimalist as the years go by, and I have released a lot of stuff because I don't want a lot of stuff. And I have a vision of the houseboat I'll be living on, and it's like a monk's residence.
I love it. Yeah, I feel the same way. Like, the older I get, the less stuff I want. I'm like, there's less stuff to clean, less stuff to move and travel around, all the things. It's just, does it bring me joy? I remember reading Marie Kondo's book and I was like, this makes so much sense. I understand.
Yeah, and we're getting ready to leave Australia. We've been here 4.5 years, and we'll be gone in 2 months. And so all the stuff that we've actually collected here to sit on and eat at, and all the furniture and stuff, we won't be taking back with us. We'll be going home with suitcases again.
Oh, that's awesome.
I'm so ready for it. So the question that I was going to ask, and we've already started discussing, is to share techniques for creating space for healing and happiness. And it really is physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual. There are tools and tricks and tips, and would love to hear some of yours.
Yeah, absolutely. You can keep it simple. You can go crazy. For me, it was just finding a corner of the house that was mine, right? A place where I could create. I call it an altar. I have my wedding tree. I have some crystals. I have my essential oils. I have a candle. It's where I go. How I start my day with meditation. Some folks like to start with prayer or journaling or all of the above. So it doesn't have to be hours at a time. It can be 10 or 15 minutes, right? I know we're pulled in a million different directions. We have multiple roles that we fill, but your place, a little corner that you can call your own, that feels good energetically. And if you have a room that you can close the door where you're undisturbed for that time, you have to get up a little earlier. I used to say I wasn't a morning person and I was a night owl, but there's actually a quiz online that you can take for your chronotype. And my body actually likes to be up earlier with the sun and does better. So it took a little bit of time for me to switch. But once I did, I'm in bed by 9. I'm up 5 a.m., 6 a.m. And I love coming up with the sun.
I absolutely have changed in that way as well. I used to be a night owl, but I'll go to bed at 8:30. I'll get up at 4:30. I was up at 4:30 this morning. I love it. I love that time, that quiet time. That's the space for me to really just sit with me. And it's really become my morning ritual to do that. And you don't have to, when I talk about creating space for healing and happiness, yes, it could be a space that you physically go sit in and do some of your healing work, but also it's a clearing, like you were talking about before, going through your house, because all of those things are eating into your bandwidth for who you want to express yourself as being.
Yes. And I was going to say, on weekends, I have a little bit of a different routine. I'm sitting there with my mug of cacao. I might have a book. I'm snuggling with my cats. And that's my space. And that's my happy place. Sometimes it's out on the deck before it gets too hot because we're in the summer months here and it's 95 degrees. But like the spring and the fall, like I love to be out there and listening to all the birds and just nature telling its story. And that just sets my vibration really high. Birds sing whether it's raining, whether it's snowing, they don't care. Right? They're always happy. And I get so many lessons from nature, especially working with the trees and Celtic Reiki. And they honor the seasons. And one of the things I notice more and more with clients, we skip winter in our lives. Like we're so kind to our electronics and we reboot them and we do the upgrades, but we really don't give ourselves that rest day, that self-care, because there's that stigma that, oh, I don't want to be looked at as selfish. I think it's selfish if you don't take care of yourself personally. And speaking to me, because I have been that person that puts myself on the back burner, gets burnt out, overwhelmed, hits the wall, slides down it. And then my body is usually the one that's okay. Now your immune system's shot. So we're sick. So I guess now you'll spend time in bed. So you're forced to it. So I pay very close attention to those signs before they get bad. And I'm like, oh, I'm a little cranky. I need more sleep. I need to take a nap. Maybe I need a massage. Maybe I need to get an energy session for myself. Really dropping into the body, but in a way that is listening. What are you trying to tell me? How can I help you?
And I agree with you. I think there has been a stigma around self-care that you might be being selfish, but the truth is, if you're not in your best form, you're not you're not giving that energy to others that you could give. And so I am a big believer in, like we all say, and they say it on the airplane, put your mask on first so that you don't pass out when you're trying to help your kids. Yeah, I think taking care of yourself is one of the highest ways that you can honor the people that you really love and yourself.
Yes. And the way you treat yourself is how others will take cues to treat you. So I've been making sure to set better boundaries. When I feel like saying no, I say no more. And without the need to justify. I don't need to say I'm an introvert or I have too many things on I'm just like, you know what? I overcommitted myself. I don't have the energy for that. And that's it.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes I don't even do that. But giving myself the permission to say no, because I was a big people pleaser, recovering people pleaser now, would say yes to way too many things and come back and be completely empty, be past empty, right? You can't pour from an empty cup. I would rather pour from the overflow because I've taken such great care of myself that people are like, oh, I love your energy. This is great. And it doesn't cost me anything, right?
Right. And really, that's a beautiful analogy. People going, yes, I want that energy from you. So that's what happens when we take care of ourselves, when we get into that self-care. And self-care is one other way of creating that space for healing and happiness and purpose and life.
Yes. And as simple as it is, just doing things that bring you joy. Like I always tap into my inner children. I have adult coloring books. I just recently got into diamond art and crafting because I loved doing that as a kid. And that brings me so much joy and fills me up so quickly. Tap into things that maybe used to bring you joy and you haven't done in a while or haven't had the time to do. 5, 10, 15 minutes, not talking hours or chunks of your day, but that shifts the vibration, that shifts the energy. It gives your brain that space. Whenever you're doing something with your hands anyway, your brain is working out things in your subconscious in a relaxed manner. So if you ask a question, it's going to focus on the answer while you're doing something else.
Beautiful. And I think that's a beautiful place to close this. But I would love for you to offer any last sentiments that you would like to our listeners, anything that you think is important for them to know.
Listen to your heart. I feel like you're being pulled to a modality, or if you're like the Akashic Records and you've heard that, and this is the third podcast you've listened to, maybe follow that thread. Get a book. If you've heard us talk about tarot or oracle cards and you don't have a deck yet, maybe visit a metaphysical shop. See how you feel. Do you get body chills? Do you get tingles? Allow yourself to play and explore and really tap into that curiosity without judgment or shame or guilt from anyone else. Just what do you want to seek out next? And if you're looking for people that are like-minded and have questions, I would love to stay in touch. You can feel free to reach out to me, but don't be afraid to embrace your magic. We are all magical.
Oh, that's beautiful. And please tell our listeners the best way that they can connect with you. I will also put all that down in the show notes.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Now, I'm Kiki Tyler on pretty much everything: Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. She'll link my email and website. But I love when people reach out in the DM, send me an email. Love to answer questions. I do have a Facebook group as well. I decided to create a community for like-minded healers, light workers, spiritual curious people, just to be surrounded with people that are going through the same journey. So there are folks who are all ends of the spectrum, from just starting their journey, some who've been on it longer. So mentors, mentees, accountability, support, co-creation. It's just a fun group. So you're welcome to join and check it out.
Wonderful. I'll put that down in the show notes as well. It was lovely to have you here, Kiki. Thank you for coming on the show, the Spirit Experience podcast, and hopefully down the road you will come back.
I would love that. Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure.
You've been listening to Grief and the Spirit Experience podcast, where we discuss spiritual practices for healing, happiness, and a life of purpose after your child transitions back to spirit. Links to reach out to myself and my guest are listed in the show notes. I'm your host, Schall Adams, wishing you a joyful week, and I'll see you next Monday.